Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar, Driving Productivity in COVID-19 Times through Retail Apps Ecosystem. Uh, with me, I have Cheryl Buck from Brook Sports, who will be the expert on the session. Before we go any further, let me introduce myself and our guest speaker. I am responsible for leading the retail PLM digital transformation initiatives across clients in ITC Infotech, and have over 17 plus years of experience across multiple retail, business, and IT roles. As part of the ITC Infotech's retail PLM team, I have been associated with 15 plus years implementation and business transformation engagements. I help develop new client base and extend existing engagements through business process optimization and solutions that help create long-term business value. Welcome, Cheryl. Could you also introduce yourself?
Hi, Pinaki. Thank you very much. I'm Cheryl Buck. As Pinaki said, I'm a senior manager at Brook Sports and responsible for IT business solutions. And that suite of systems includes our product systems, PLM, soon to be a PIM. We have also support for sales and our runner experience or REX customer support team. And then I also oversee support for our marketing systems. I have actually, prior to taking on an expanded role, was the single point person for our Flex PLM implementation for the past 5 years, and look forward to talking with you today.
Thanks, Cheryl. So before I move forward, some points on the webinar. We will have approximately 25 minutes of presentation, followed by about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. However, please continue to share your questions through the presentation. We will either take them up at the end or reach out to you once the webinar is over. Now, in addition, there will be 3 polls during the webinar that will show up on your screens. You will be expected to select appropriate options to respond to the questions. With that, I am moving to the body of today's discussion. To start with, the year 2020 started with COVID-19, which has brought new businesses down to juggle a range of new processes, work on new priorities and challenges, address business continuity, workforce productivity, and security risks, impacting immediate resilience issues. Now, stay-at-home orders, stagnating growth, impact on retail sales and supply chain, canceled trade fairs and conferences, and travel ban is severely impacting the way the retail business, especially the apparel and footwear retail, is conducting business. The need is to adjust to these challenges at the earliest, and in a way that such adjustments can be easily modified with changing scenarios. We believe that it's about rethinking and readjusting your digital transformation priorities to align with the current situation, which will help you to better cater to the new realities. So as part of today's agenda, we have the impact of COVID-19 with focus on the retail PLM process in the context of footwear, apparel, and related businesses. A suggested approach to mitigate the current situation, how best the businesses can, what are the things that businesses would be seeing to mitigate, and finally, what it looks like for the mitigation options, essentially the one with focus on retail PLM apps that we are going to discuss. Now, before I move any further, there is a small poll that we wanted to introduce just to gauge what the current thought process of most of our participants are. Essentially, the poll is going to ask you a question on how likely you are to reevaluate the digital transformation initiatives in your organization, given the current scenario. You have 3 options, high, moderate, low. You need to select one of those options. We have about 30-35 seconds before we display the results. So Cheryl, given the current situation and Brooks obviously is in the midst of all this, what do you think is the general thought process on reevaluating the digital transformation initiatives industry-wise?
Well, I think it's really important to actually the digital transformation and move to more virtual technologies are going to be critical to overcoming, uh, the challenges presented by COVID and certainly anything like that that happens again in the future.
So I think the polls are slowly showing up, and I believe it's quite aligned to what you just said. Right now, it's about 88% who feel that they are definitely going to look at their digital transformation initiatives. Okay, so with that, let me move on to the bulk of the presentation with understanding that our uh, audience is quite aligned to the fact that they are looking at their digital transformation initiatives. Before I jump into the actual initiatives that would help, let me first get a brief on what impact the retail product lifecycle is, what impact COVID is having on the retail product lifecycle. Now, as you can see, the entire set of activities from planning all the way through the sales is kind of impacted with the situation that is coming out of retail. From a planning perspective, there is the need to frequently revise the buy plan to adjust to the new situation, cut down on style width. Designers are being asked to simplify their designs, make them as generic as possible. Developers, on the other hand, are being asked to rationalize the choice of their materials, consolidate on components, partly driven by the difficulty in developing new materials, and also the fact that many of the sources of those materials may not be available for the developments to take place and the materials and components to come through. Sourcing is being kind of working towards optimizing price and the capability that is available with whatever sources that are operational as of now. From a fit perspective, it is more about reducing samples, making use of whatever is available, and also the limitations that are imposed due to the lack of availability of factories which can do the samples or the sample rooms that are kind of operational, and the limitations around shipping samples from the sources to the actual evaluation centers on site. The supply chain is also impacted with the need to readjust quantities, to ship, to look at multiple shipping options, to adjust to the shipping limitations that are being imposed, and finally the lack of sales opportunities within stores, either imposed through the lockdowns and other restrictions. Across the overall product life cycle, merchants, designers, sourcing, supply chain, and sales, pretty much everybody is impacted in a way which is making the process need to readjust. Now, overall, from an overall impact perspective, it is connected processes. There are multiple roles that are getting impacted, and there are different touch points, retail touch points, which are getting impacted due to the current situation. Let me just go one level down to the next aspect of the impact, which is on product, retail product development. Now, as the design, development, and the supply chains are in lockdown, the focus is on how the industry will adapt to the emerging scenario. If we look at the pre-COVID cycle, the entire process from design all the way through the point where it was being evaluated and it was being looked at has currently come down. It has significantly reduced. It has significantly reduced. So there are now multiple cycles within the same earlier extended cycle. And within each of those cycles, the need is to readjust and realign to a ever emerging scenario. Now, what happens as a result of this is that businesses are required to more and more look at the rapid adoption to technology-based solutions, which will help them to realign with the current scenario, and also to reset and reshape their business processes, which is more sustainable and purpose-driven. The the aim is to digitize the product development process for those who are yet to digitize, for those who have already digitized, to basically take it to the next level, to work towards connected systems so that there is minimum repetitive activities, and finally to make the processes more seamless and free flowing. Now with that, I will bring in Cheryl, our guest speaker, and get her insights on a couple of things. So Cheryl, could you share some of your views on the current crisis that is impacted retail? Overall, can you give us some idea on how Brooks is working through this?
Yeah, so aside from the obvious that we have store closures and we're moving more and more to online shopping, there's that piece. But within the product lifecycle development process, we're also seeing that we had early impacts of a possible shortage of raw materials, concern about whether or not our factories would continue to manufacture and be available for that, as most of that happens in Asia for us. Then once we work through those factory status and a concern about raw material availability, then we really started looking at the product development processes. And there really the primary challenge has been in the ability to, or lack of ability to, share physical samples. So our work is all around running shoes, running apparel, and the look and feel, particularly the performance of a material, performance of a product, is really critical. So biggest challenge has been how do we continue to engage customers, but also our developers and designers throughout that product development lifecycle process.
Also, could you give us some key PD processes that Brooks has had to kind of improvise on, some high-level improvisations that you have already put in place?
Yeah, so we are having to improvise on that whole idea of how we get customer feedback. Our R&D lab is in our home office, and we haven't been in the office for 2 months. And then, so that impacts our fit testing, wear testing, and development of future materials. And then also for the products that are in process, a lot of that, the samples had already been shipped. So we've had to figure out how do we share those samples? How do we get samples physically from one person on our team to the next person on our team? We're just now kind of dipping our toes into 3D, so we haven't had that largely available, and so that's something we'll have to look at. But really, fit testing, wear testing, R&D, sample management, those are the primary areas that have been impacted.
So it seems sample management is kind of something that's getting critically impacted, and obviously the ability to view samples and also communicate on the sample changes and requirements happens to be one of the key impediments.
Yes,
so with that,
I think that's true.
So with that, let us kind of get into the next set of poll questions. This is more to gauge on what our audience thinks in terms of what are the key kind of business process areas that are likely to be a focus when it comes to the product development process reevaluation. You have multiple choices, so you could possibly select more than one option for. So Cheryl, you brought about the aspect of sample being one of them, but apart from that, what other things you think are getting kind of impacted and most likely will be reevaluated?
Samples, but also the design. So, you know, it's all interrelated, interconnected, and so we get samples multiple times throughout the physical samples multiple times throughout the design and development process. So as I said, we're just dipping our toes into incorporating 3D design and 3D modeling into our processes. So we have been able to leverage 3D visualizations to overcome some of the hurdles or to address some of the questions that we would typically address by actually looking at a physical sample. I think that ability to move virtual and also really tightening up the communication and the engagement between all the different parties, those have been most critical at this point.
I believe a lot of what you are saying is reflecting in the poll that's showing up. Apparently, merchandise assortment planning, essentially what kicks up the whole process, is very top on the agenda, followed by product design and followed by product development, which obviously includes samples that you brought up initially, and product design, which again incorporates parts of elements of 3D and other aspects that you kind of discussed. So I think we are kind of pretty much in tune with what our audience is bringing up as part of this poll. Now with that, let me kind of quickly move on to what we believe the business users need in the current scenario. So looking at the product development process and the things that happen, plan all the way through selling of the merchandise, I think the key areas that we believe needs to be focused on is the aspect of how we can ensure that there is a seamless process which ensures minimum rework or mistakes. So from a overall process alignment perspective, increased collaboration definitely is one of the key areas that needs to be looked into. So that all the stakeholders can kind of interact with each other in a way which does not create any unnecessary process issues. Quick decision making, availability of information that is accurate and real time to ensure that the decisions are objective, and reducing rework, primarily driven by the reduction in the number of data entry points and automation of quite a lot of points. We'll see later in this presentation how that can be facilitated. And all of this could possibly be driven through a mechanism which ensures better and more effective communication, end-to-end visibility to the process, accurate information flowing through across all the stakeholders, a general ease of working with whatever systems you are using, and overall a faster and efficient process. Now, the key pillars to all of this would be intuitive platforms, which are intelligent, predictive, and basically assist the users in making the right choices and decisions. Something that is scalable and easily extendable across systems. Something that could be based out of a standard architecture, so that once it's put in place, it does not need to change every time new stakeholders are to be added or new elements have to be added. Something which is accessible, available across all stakeholders, and is able to kind of balance the dual need of being on premise or on cloud, depending on individual choices. Data that is real time and accurate. And finally, modern UI UX, which makes the work of the users, both in terms of understanding the information and also working through it easy. Overall, if we look at the stakeholders, there is similar data requirements, given that they work pretty much along the same set of platforms. There are multiple systems that are involved, say planning versus a product development versus an ERP system, and varying display expectations, because as we will see, the way users work, it is not necessary that they all need to see the information the same way. It could be the same information, but not displayed in the same way for them to make kind of informed decisions. So the key aspect is how can we improve productivity, efficiency, and business agility as we want to enable or fulfill each of these business user expectations. So in the context of the retail PLM space, the question is, what are the key drivers for adopting the measured, practical, and informed approach, which will help businesses navigate in the post-COVID world. We believe there are like 5 key drivers that is going to make this happen: to be seamlessly connected across all your retail RFA processes that ensures flow of information and ease of working. The driving productivity through virtual collaboration. 3D is a very good example, and there could be others as well, which help negate the impact of the social distancing and the fact that everybody is not in one place. And also bring in objectivity as one works through it. The facilitating process optimization and business agility kind of put together to enable adjusting to a rapidly changing environment, which is what COVID is right now. Ensuring clear and timely communication, and finally increasing efficiency through accurate availability of information. The whole, there could be many ways to kind of facilitate this. But obviously, one of the things that we want to look at is how we could extend the retail PLM solution, especially Flex PLM, using role-based apps, applications that are catering to individual user or role needs. Now, I'll again want to kind of bring back Cheryl to the discussion. Cheryl, can you talk about the various things that you believe is going to add value to address some of the process issues? I mean, given that Brooks is one of the users of the retail PLM app, what are some of the steps that Brooks already has in place today, and also what are the other things that they would likely want or you believe is going to facilitate the use of apps?
Yeah, so I would say that, everything on this slide is absolutely critical to a successful product lifecycle process. And that's true whether we have a COVID-19 event or no COVID-19. I think the COVID-19 activities have increased the need to be creative and find, and it has increased the urgency to find ways to smooth out wrinkles in that collaborative work process. I think we're going to see that 3D models are critical, material scanning, incorporating textures into our visual 3D models, ensuring information is accurate and available in near real time. So communication here is one hub, but if you think about it, it actually flows and is critical across that whole line of activities. So how do we keep our updates current, keep information current and available at the moment people need it, sharing status, comments about decisions, calendar, and workflow. What we have incorporated so far within our Flex PLM world is vendor portal. We have reports that point our Asia partners directly to the products that they need to focus on that have been changed. Our design and development team for the COVID crisis installed higher quality, higher resolution cameras so that when they're working remotely, they have an ability to see the detail more clearly on the products that they're sharing over video. Fit sampling, so we're doing more with our own runners, sending or driving samples around. So we're a small company, we're headquartered in Seattle. So, we have an ability to actually physically take things to our respective players in a development process, and we're doing that. Wear testing, looking at some of the areas where the COVID crisis is less likely to impact or result in a lockdown, and using those wear testers more than ones in big urban centers. You really have to think through the whole process and where are the impacts of COVID-19. We're doing virtual shop-alongs instead of actually in-store shopping. Fit testing, we actually have somebody running bras around to the different women in our organization who do fit testing, and then they do that virtual fit testing with iPhones and show how the product fits. And so we're seeing a lot more of that. Again, the largest hurdle really has been about being able to physically share the product and materials. So We see more of that being done by either sequentially sending a product sample from one person in the process to the next, or in fact, in the situation of material samples where we don't have the time to reorder, we're actually taking those little samples they give us, cutting up in smaller pieces, and sending those out in packets to everybody involved in the design process.
Thanks for the insight, Cheryl. Could you add something on the style tracker app that Brooks is using?
Sure, I was going to talk about that a little later, but we do have the ITC Style Tracker app installed, and that's been fantastic. It gives us a visual reference point for a given season, shows us where each style is in the season, how it's tracking to its due date, and really is particularly useful, I think, for our leadership team to see where we sit. One of the things that we've done with that is to extend it to actually provide a more detailed accounting of here are the things that have to be done to pass this threshold at each step along the way. So it's served both as a communication tool to leadership to track how we're progressing in a season, but also at a more detailed level, down to what do you need to do to get this style moved forward to the next checkpoint.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks for the valuable inputs. So with that, let me move to the part to review what would be the extending PLM value using apps look like. Now, a mature retail PLM solution like PTC's Flex PLM has readily available inbuilt API framework. Now, what this framework does is it basically helps to very easily exchange information between platforms, between two systems. Now, what it can also do is it could be used to use the information that is available in Flex or to push back information from Flex through retail apps. Now, what these apps could be individual applications that help either to address a specific activity like tracking, as Cheryl mentioned, to give immediate status updates and identify and address process bottlenecks versus running analytics to get an end-to-end visibility and facilitate faster and objective decision making, enabled on mobile devices to give more flexibility to the users in terms of how and where they work, on also incorporating some of the native tool capabilities within the mobile devices, enabling automation, RPA-based automation that helps provide resolution to service requests, essentially to auto-perform tasks which otherwise are repetitive and manual in nature. And finally, process-based apps which could address end-to-end business processes or parts of business processes, depending on how detailed or how extensive those apps can be. But overall, they have like 5 key characteristics, we would say, which is a modern UI UX using the latest that is available in UI and UX, real-time data availability, exchange of information, whether it is only between Flex and the app or across multiple systems, intuitive platforms that give insights to the users as they work, scalable on an as required basis. It could be scaled up or down depending on what the needs are. And finally, supported on cloud for those who are on cloud. The key advantage would be that while a solution like Flex PLM is extremely robust and able to address the industry best practices, in many cases, it's the individual user needs or business preferences may be slightly different. Using the apps, such a mechanism can be easily enabled without significantly impacting the way Flex is set up or the kind of features or functionality that it offers. So it's not about kind of adding, but modifying, but extending the features and capabilities that a platform like Flex PLM has. So kind of good from both worlds, the business best practices that Flex has and also some individual user preferences or requirements that they may have. I'll bring Cheryl again. So Cheryl, could you add more to how you see the app ecosystem adding value? What could be the key areas that it's adding value outside, of course, the style tracker that you are using now?
Yeah, so as Panaki said, I think we've yet to see a PLM system come on the market that has the full functionality and flexibility to meet every organization's needs. It's not just that individual users have different needs, but if you look at all the different product types, the different approaches and priorities across industries and companies within those industries, it would take quite a feat to develop a PLM system that had the flexibility to be configured to each of those needs. And so providing a framework of special function applications that can plug and play is a great way to address some of those gaps. So I think what we're seeing is that we have an opportunity with improved reporting and analytics. One of the biggest challenges and a place where we see a lot of work being done outside of PTC around Flex PLM is how do we get data out of Flex in a way that allows us to meaningfully view it and integrate it with other data. Calendar and status tracking. You heard that we have the style tracking app installed, so that's an area where we really felt like we could beef up what was provided. Mobile sample measurement, being able to take a phone or a tablet into a sample session and fit sample or whatever the particular session is and being able to capture those measurements in real time. Integrated high quality image capture. We'd love to be able to take a picture and take our fit sample notes directly on that image and incorporate that into Flex. So as I said earlier, we have this style tracking app, and that's been a big win for us. And our teams are actually trying to figure out how do we extend the visibility to critical activities in the life cycle, even those that happen or take place outside of the PLM system. So how do we extend the range and scope of that product?
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks for giving us detailed insight on what could be the next in terms of apps. So with that, let me just go a step deeper to basically get to explain exactly how the apps on retail PTC platform would look like, or what do they mean. Now, essentially, the apps are intended to address different levels of complexity in terms of information source and functionality, depending on individual user needs, process needs, organization needs. These could be based out of one system or multiple systems. Ideally, these should be based out of a common architecture, meaning once you have the architecture in place, adding new users or building additional functionalities or features or extending new apps should not be a problem. Overall, the expectation is to have a templatized layout so that across the organization, there is a standardized look and feel and UI experience between the stakeholders. So just taking an example, few examples of stakeholders within a standard process, using personas of Jack, the sourcing manager, Emily, the designer, and Sarah, the merchandiser. We know that they basically work through maybe the same set of data overall, but when it comes to their individual work requirements, these are different. So they need to, someone like Jack needs to track the developments and needs to have an early visibility to so that he can address issues. Emily, the designer, on the other hand, is looking at more easy and flexible way of presenting her designs, being as creative as possible while she is presenting them during the line reviews, and also taking notes and being able to seamlessly incorporate those notes in the overall data that is captured in Flex or similar PLM system without the need to have to take it separately physically and then going back and doing the data entry a second time. Sarah, the merchandiser, on the other hand, wants to have an all-round visibility on what the styles are, how they are doing, so that she can readjust her current buys and also decide on what could be the next set of developments that she would possibly look for or approve. The idea is these apps could be read-only, meaning just static data. They could have limited updates, which provides user flexibility to add information. And finally, they could be very flexible in terms of what they are displaying and how the updates are happening and what kind of insights that they are throwing. Now, with that, let me move on to the next one, which is more about the app ecosystem. So the idea is to build a set of apps that help drive your overall process from plan all the way through sales, and then incorporating those sales information back into planning. Using the app framework, we could possibly have a number of apps to address different business issues and problems. Something like a mass style creator, which would basically allow putting styles based on the plan information, and then comparing the style offerings as part of initial reviews, and then pushing the information to the Flex PLM system as some sort of a mass style creation. These could also be enabled using AI or similar platforms to auto-associate spec and additional components like a shell bomb to reduce overall data entry. Something like a bomb compare and edit app to help facilitate the creation, update, comparison of bombs. And also in many cases using AI to suggest material replacements to make better informed decisions, especially in these times where there is a lot of inventory lying around, or there are restrictions on what materials are available. A line board app, like I mentioned, a very easy, flexible way of showing designs. A cost sheet compare app, which would allow comparing cost sheets, making updates, a graphical representation on what those updates are as you do your markdown analysis or a what if analysis to ensure that optimum cost and source selections are made. Sample review app, something that to facilitate something that Cheryl just touched upon, something that can be enabled using a QR code to facilitate quick search of samples, additional search and update features, incorporating 3D or AR visualizations to augment what users are seeing as they are reviewing the sample so that the overall decision making is objective. And finally, going into the ERP world, is something that facilitates factory audit and managing the corrective action plans, CAPA, or PO tracking to give early visibility and predict potential delays or bottlenecks through the process. And finally, an application which would possibly help you to analyze styles to identify attribute level success factors, which could then be used to drive future developments. The idea being that the apps could be standalone, meaning they could come from one system. They could be using data, which is a combination of multiple systems to address the individual business needs and requirements. I'll bring in Cheryl again to the discussion. Cheryl, how best do you think we can have advanced technologies like AI and ML to facilitate the process?
Well, I think leveraging computing power in the form of AI and machine learning, along with the robust descriptive and performance-related data we tend to capture around our products, has the ability to significantly reduce time spent on research, analysis, and decision-making at all points along the product lifecycle. So a great chance to improve efficiency, but also the quality of the decisions that are being made. And if you look at a PLM, there are oftentimes a few specific attributes that really drive the values that populate in a lot of the other attributes. And so I think there we have an opportunity to take RPA and use that to eliminate or reduce data entry. I think across the board, if you ask our developers and designers and everyone using the PLM what their favorite part of their work is, it won't be doing data entries. So anything we can do there to drive automated population of fields is fantastic, and RPA supports that. The specific areas, I think you touched on most of them in the slide, and so proposing product lines, proposing colorways based on sales data and market trends, with high volume of products that have specs that could be met with a variety of different materials, then we can take that machine learning and AI to choose materials that best meet the overall objective, whether it's increasing revenue or increased sustainability, increased margins. whatever combination of those things is there. I mean, that's what machine learning and AI is all about, is doing what is easy for a computer, but more challenging and time consuming for an individual, is wading through all that data. I think other examples, product features, what colorways are going to resonate most with our consumers. And then last but not least, the whole idea of improving processes. So, as we are using the style tracker, we actually capture dates along the way, so we know how long each step of the process is actually taking. And so there's a bunch of data that we're able to now begin to look at and leverage to reflect patterns in our development process that might provide opportunities to smooth things out, or pinpoint quality challenges or trouble spots.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks for the very detailed insight coming from someone who is already using some of these apps and seeing the value in it. With that, I'll move into our last poll, which is more directed at gauging what are the key technical platforms that the users feel will help drive the digital transformation. The poll should be coming up on your screen shortly. So I think, Cheryl, you touched upon all of these as potential candidates for digital initiatives. Do you have like any specific preferences in terms of what could be more important than the other?
Well, I think in the current moment, with all of the social distancing and inability to get into our workspaces, I would say 3D and anything that enables or promotes a visual representation of a product and eliminates the hurdle of physical product samples and those kinds of things is critical. But overall, I would agree with this slide that artificial intelligence is right up there. We need to do what we can to better leverage the just massive amounts of data points that exist around products and leverage those along with sales data to more quickly refine our product selection and adjust products to meet the consumer needs.
Thanks. I think the way the polls are showing up, it seems AI definitely has its kind of nose in front, but both 3D and RPA are kind of pretty close by. So that's kind of an all-round mixture of these three, which kind of leads the way. With that, we come to the end of this presentation. I'm not sure if you have time for Q&A, but I would love to take like 1 or 2 questions, and then we will definitely follow up individually for all your questions separately. So if you don't have any questions, then maybe we can end. Thanks all for joining the webinar, and we will reach out to you wherever required. And anyone who is willing to reach out, please reach out to our respective sales teams who would be glad to answer all your questions. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks Cheryl for your insights. Thank you.
Thanks, Panaki. Bye-bye.